They were praised, paid, and plastered on every billboard. But off-camera, they were drowning in vodka, in pressure, in pain. No one dared to stop. This is what it looked like when the fame didn't fix anything. Buster Keaton's silent struggles. He was one of the biggest stars of the silent film era, stone-faced, brilliant, a master of physical comedy. But once sound came in, everything started falling apart, including him. In 1928, he signed with MGM. That deal killed his freedom. Studios now controlled his scripts, his stunts, and eventually his drinking. He didn't take it well. At first, it was casual, just a few drinks after work. Then it turned into drinking on set. Then it never stopped. By 1930, Buster was showing up hungover, forgetting lines, and walking through scenes like a ghost. Directors had to cut around him. His timing, once perfect, was gone. He started drinking whiskey in his dressing room between takes. Some days, he didn't know where he was. Others, he just didn't care. He tried to hide it, but people noticed. His wife left him in 1932. He lost access to his kids. He went on drinking binges that lasted days. At one point, MGM assigned a full-time assistant just to keep him from falling apart mid-scene. Things hit rock bottom in 1934. Buster was found wandering the street, drunk and confused. He was committed to a sanitarium for exhaustion, but it was really to dry out. He escaped in a straitjacket, literally, climbed out a window and vanished. For the next few years, he was broke and out of work. He took whatever roles he could, often uncredited or in low-budget shorts. He kept drinking. His friends said he was lost, but they didn't know how to help. Rehab wasn't really a thing back then. You either pulled yourself together or you disappeared. In the early 1940s, something changed. He met a woman named Eleanor Norris. She was 20 years younger and didn't drink. Somehow, she helped him stop. Slowly, Buster came back. He started writing again, got some TV gigs, even returned to MGM as a gag writer. He never drank like that again. Tallulah Bankhead's martini mornings. She wasn't quiet about anything, not her politics, not her lovers, and definitely not her drinking. She drank like it was her job. Breakfast started with a martini. Lunch included more. By dinner, no one could count. She grew up wealthy and wild, raised in Alabama high society. By her 20s, she was already famous on Broadway. Hollywood came calling in the 1930s, but she didn't care much for rules. Studios asked her to tone it down. She didn't. Tallulah lit cigarettes during takes, refused to stick to the script, and drank openly on set. One producer said directing her was like trying to hold water in a net. She laughed it off. She always did. If someone mentioned the hangovers, she said, "Don't be silly. I never get hangovers. I get applause." She could be brilliant when she was focused. In The Little Foxes on stage, she played the lead role to rave reviews. But one night, she collapsed halfway through the performance. A stagehand said she'd downed 2 martinis and half a flask before curtain. The audience waited, curtain stayed closed, and Tallulah was carried out the back door. She didn't hide it. In fact, she leaned into it. On talk shows, she sipped whiskey and answered questions with slurred charm. Reporters wrote about her fabulous wreckage. She loved the drama. She called herself the world's most fabulous drunk. But it wasn't always funny. Friends said she'd disappear for days. Some weekends ended in hospitals. One doctor warned her she was drinking herself sick. She shrugged and lit another cigarette. By the 1950s, her film roles were drying up. Her voice was gravel. Her timing was off. Directors stopped calling. She stayed famous mostly for being Tallulah, loud, drunk, and outrageous. She never fully stopped drinking. Even in her later years, she was still sipping bourbon before interviews and talking circles around younger actors. But her body gave out. Liver issues, lung problems, weight loss. She died in 1968 at age 66, alone in her apartment. The cause? Pneumonia, worsened by years of heavy drinking and smoking. Billie Holiday's Booze and Blues. She had one of the most haunting voices in music history, but off stage she fought a constant war with racism, heartbreak, and a bottle that never left her side. She started drinking young, working in nightclubs where liquor flowed like water. By the late 1930s, she was a star. Her voice could stop a room. Songs like Strange Fruit hit hard. But backstage, Billie drank to calm her nerves before shows. It started with gin, then brandy, then anything she could get her hands on. In the early 1940s, her fame exploded. So did her addiction. She was drinking before sets, between songs, and after every show. Friends said she was never fully sober. Club owners noticed too. Some nights, she forgot lyrics. Other nights, she couldn't stand. She was arrested for possession in 1947, but alcohol was always the quieter demon. Her cabaret card was revoked in New York, which meant she couldn't perform in any venue that served alcohol. That wiped out most of her income. Still, she drank. In hotel rooms, she'd sneak liquor into orange juice bottles. On the road, she hid flasks in makeup bags. Her manager tried cutting her off. She fired him. Her voice, though strained, still pulled crowds. But her memory started slipping, her temper got worse, and her drinking kept going. By 1956, she wrote a memoir. Parts of it were censored. The rest told the story of a woman in pain. In interviews, she brushed off the drinking. "I drink because I need to forget," she once said. "Some people pray. I pour." The final years were brutal. She was often broke, blacklisted, and barely functioning. In 1959, she collapsed in her New York apartment. At the hospital, they found cirrhosis, kidney failure, and fluid in her lungs. She was 44. The police showed up while she was still in bed and arrested her again for drug possession. They even posted a guard at her door. She died days later with just 70 cents in her bank account. Her voice lives on, but Billie never made peace with the bottle. The music soared. She didn't. Robert Walker's vodka breakdown. He had the charm, the looks, and a rising career in the 1940s. He also had vodka in his trailer, vodka in his coffee, and vodka in his veins. By the time he gave his most iconic performance, he was already falling apart. His big break came in Since You Went Away, 1944, where he starred opposite his real-life ex-wife, Jennifer Jones. It wasn't just awkward, but it was brutal. The divorce had crushed him, and he started drinking more to cope. Crew members said he shook between takes and sometimes needed help walking to set. The booze made him unpredictable. One day he was polite and professional. The next, he'd explode over nothing. He fought with directors, slurred his lines, threw furniture. MGM tried to protect him, but he was becoming a liability. In 1948, he had a breakdown on set and was admitted to the Menninger Clinic, a psychiatric hospital. The official reason was emotional exhaustion. The real reason was that he was drinking himself sick. Doctors put him on sedatives to calm his nerves. He promised to quit. He didn't. He made a short comeback in 1951 with Strangers on a Train. It was his best role, chilling, sharp, unforgettable. He played a charming psychopath. The scary part? He didn't need to stretch. Friends said he barely had to act. Alfred Hitchcock kept the camera rolling even when Walker went off script. But behind the scenes, things were still bad. He was mixing alcohol with barbiturates. He didn't sleep. He stopped eating. Some nights he called friends sobbing, convinced his life was over. In August 1951, a doctor came to his home to sedate him during one of his episodes. He was given amobarbital to calm down. He never woke up. Officially, it was an accidental reaction. Unofficially, it was alcohol, stress, and too many pills in a body that couldn't take it anymore. Robert Walker was just 32. He had 2 sons, a hit film in theaters, and a reputation that Hollywood couldn't figure out. One reviewer called him a star who burned too fast and left nothing behind but questions. The only thing more tragic than his performance was how close it was to the real thing, Diana Barrymore's broken dynasty. She was born into fame. Her father was John Barrymore, a legendary actor and legendary drunk. She got both of those traits. At first, it looked like she'd make it big. In the early 1940s, Universal Studios signed her with headlines calling her the next big Barrymore. She had the name, the face, and enough talent to turn heads. But behind it, she was already drinking hard, just like her father. She started missing rehearsals. Sometimes she'd show up so hungover, production had to cancel. On stage, she slurred lines. Off stage, she collapsed in dressing rooms. One night, during a performance of Romantic Mr. Dickens, she walked off mid-scene and never returned. No explanation. Just left. By 1944, her career had stalled. Universal quietly dropped her. She married a few times, but each relationship fell apart, usually under the weight of booze and shouting matches. One ex-husband said living with her was like riding a train with no brakes. She tried Broadway again, but the drinking got in the way. Crew members hid liquor bottles backstage just to keep her sober during shows. It didn't work. Critics noticed. One review said she looked tired before she even opened her mouth. In 1957, she published a memoir called Too Much, Too Soon. It told everything: the drinking, the blackouts, the hospital stays, the suicide attempts, the family name that opened every door and then crushed her once she walked through. It sold well, but nothing changed. That same year, Warner Brothers adapted her memoir into a film. She didn't star in it. She didn't even consult. While the movie played in theaters, Diana was living in a rundown apartment, broke and drinking again. In 1960, her housekeeper found her in bed, surrounded by pills and empty bottles. The autopsy listed natural causes, but doctors said it was years of alcohol and sedatives. She was 38. She once said, "Everyone expects me to be a Barrymore, but I don't know what that means anymore." She wanted to live up to the name. Instead, it buried her. Truman Capote's talk show spirals. He wrote one of the greatest true crime books ever printed. In Cold Blood made him a literary star. But by the 1970s, most people didn't see him as a writer. They saw him as a drunk guest on late-night TV. Capote was always eccentric, but once fame hit hard, so did the partying. He was a regular at Studio 54, known for sipping chilled vodka out of tiny crystal glasses and slurring insults at whoever got too close. He called it research. Friends called it a meltdown. He didn't hide it. On the Dick Cavett show, he showed up visibly drunk and rambled through his answers. On The Tonight Show, he flirted with Johnny Carson, made fun of other guests, and then forgot where he was. It became a pattern: invite Truman, expect a mess. Publishers started pulling back. One editor said his writing got sloppy and mean. He had promised a massive novel called Answered Prayers, meant to be his masterpiece. But when excerpts came out, they didn't land. Critics called them petty and cruel. Friends stopped returning his calls. Capote responded the only way he knew how. He drank more. By the early 80s, things had gotten grim. He bounced between friends' guest rooms and upscale rehab centers. He didn't last long in either. Sometimes he was funny and charming. Other times he screamed at nurses and trashed hotel rooms. One friend found him in a robe on the floor, drinking out of a vase. In 1984, he moved into the home of Joanne Carson, Johnny Carson's ex-wife. She tried to help him dry out. It didn't work. On August 25th, he died in her guest room from liver failure, complicated by drug and alcohol use. He was 59. He used to say he wanted to be remembered for his words. In the end, it was the slurred ones people remembered most. Sam Peckinpah's Bloody Cocktails. He made violent, brilliant films. He also made enemies on set, passed out in editing rooms, and drank like the credits depended on it. In the 1960s, he directed The Wild Bunch, a western so bloody and stylish it changed the genre. But behind the camera, Sam was already deep into drinking. He kept vodka in a water bottle and whiskey in his coat. Cast and crew said he would sip through takes, bark orders mid-slur, and forget what scene they were filming. At first, producers tolerated it. His films made money and his chaos sometimes added edge, but by the 1970s, he was spiraling. On Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, 1973, he fought with the studio, missed deadlines, and drank from morning to night. Crew members found him asleep in the editing room, drooling on reels. He didn't deny it. In interviews, he joked that bourbon was his assistant director. When critics asked why his films were so violent, he said, I'm just showing what's real." The truth was, he was barely hanging on. Studios started to panic. They began assigning shadow editors to finish his films behind his back. His name still appeared on the credits, but much of the work was done without him. He lashed out, but the studios held the power and the checkbook. By the early 1980s, he was taking whatever work he could get. He directed a few music videos. One was for Julian Lennon. Between takes, he drank alone in his trailer, coughing and shaking. His hands were too unsteady to hold a camera. He gave orders from a folding chair. Sam Peckinpah died in 1984 from heart failure. Doctors pointed to years of alcohol abuse as a major cause. Edward Furlong's fast fall. He was just 14 when he landed Terminator 2. Overnight, he became one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood. But as fast as the fame came, the drinking followed. By the late 90s, Furlong's teen idol days were over, and he was drinking hard. It wasn't just beer at parties. Friends said he'd start the day with vodka and keep it going until he passed out. He still landed roles, American History X, Detroit Rock City, but directors had to work around his behavior. He'd show up late, forget lines, or vanish during breaks. The press caught on. In 2001, he was arrested for trying to free lobsters from a tank in a Kentucky grocery store, drunk, of course. The charges were dropped, but it made headlines. He laughed it off. Then he got arrested again and again. In 2004, he entered rehab. It didn't stick. Later that year, he was spotted staggering out of a club in Los Angeles, glassy-eyed and barely able to stand. Paparazzi caught the whole thing. He tried to stay out of sight, but the photos followed him everywhere. Then came the restraining orders. His ex-girlfriend accused him of violence while intoxicated. In 2010, he was banned from seeing his son after testing positive for alcohol. The court records show a pattern: relapse, arrest, rehab, repeat. Studios stopped calling. He lost the role in Terminator 3. By 2013, he was facing jail time and showed up in court looking pale, bloated, and exhausted. The judge ordered another rehab stint, his fifth. In 2019, he claimed to be sober and was briefly brought back for Terminator. Dark fate, though his appearance was limited to digital footage. He said it felt like a second chance. Whether it stuck is unclear. Mischa Barton's vodka fog. In the early 2000s, she was everywhere. After the OC launched her to fame, she became a fashion icon, a tabloid fixture, and a regular on red carpets. But behind the flashes and premieres, the drinking was building fast. She was only 17 when the show started. By 19, she was hitting LA clubs almost nightly. Paparazzi followed her from bar to bar. Photos showed her stumbling out of back doors, getting into cars barefoot, or clutching energy drinks that weren't just energy. Friends said vodka was her go-to. In 2007, it all caught up with her. On December 27th, she was pulled over in West Hollywood. She had no license, failed a sobriety test, and was charged with DUI. Officers found illegal substances and an open bottle of alcohol in the car. She was booked, photographed, and released the next morning. The story made national headlines. She entered rehab shortly after, claiming it was for exhaustion. But insiders said it was about more than that. Her behavior had become erratic. She stopped showing up for meetings, lost roles, burned bridges. Even her management team backed away. In 2009, things took a darker turn. Police were called to her LA home for a mental health check. She was placed on an involuntary psychiatric hold. Later, she said the incident was triggered by stress and medication, but alcohol was still in the picture. Over the next few years, she tried to rebuild, but the pattern didn't break. More nights out, more shaky interviews. On The Hill's New Beginnings in 2019, she opened up about how fame and pressure pushed her into unhealthy habits. She didn't name the substances, but the implication was clear. Barton said she wanted to stay sober, but her history was hard to ignore. For a long time, she wasn't an actress in control. She was a walking headline. The stardom came fast. The crash came faster. Mischa didn't just lose momentum. She got swallowed by the fog. Shia LaBeouf's unraveling on screen. He didn't just party. He unraveled in public. The arrests, meltdowns, and blackouts, alcohol was behind nearly all of it. After Transformers made him a global name, Shia drank hard behind the scenes. On the set of Lawless, 2012, he admitted he got drunk on real moonshine to get into character. "I didn't know any other way to do it," he said. Co-stars noticed. He was erratic, unpredictable, sometimes slurring before lunch. That same year, he was spotted at a London pub stumbling into fights and being escorted out. The footage made the rounds online. His team blamed stress. Fans blamed the bottle. In 2014, things got worse. At a performance of Cabaret in New York, he was arrested for smoking indoors, shouting at the cast, and slapping someone on the rear. He was reportedly drunk when police arrived and had to be fitted with a face mask at the station. The next day, he apologized. A week later, he was drinking again. More arrests followed. In 2015, police picked him up in Austin, Texas, after he ran through traffic screaming at strangers. Officers said he smelled like booze and couldn't stand still. He tried rehab, then relapsed. Over and over. In 2017, a viral video showed him cursing out officers during a drunken outburst in Savannah, Georgia. "You're going to hell, straight to hell," he said, slurring and red-eyed. It wasn't his first arrest that year, or his last. He later admitted he was drinking to deal with fear. "I didn't want to be an actor anymore," he said. "I wanted to disappear." Instead, he kept showing up in headlines, drunk, damaged, and out of control. Therapists diagnosed him with PTSD and complex trauma. Rehab helped briefly, then more court dates, more apologies. Even when sober, the damage lingered. Studios backed off, collaborators cut ties. In recent years, he's claimed sobriety, said he's working on himself, but the past is heavy. The footage, the police records, the slurred interviews, they're still out there. Shia once said he used alcohol to numb the noise. The problem was, it just made everything louder. Some Hollywood stars weren't just heavy drinkers, they were so drunk they had to be carried onto set. Others slurred their lines, forgot entire movies they starred in, or even died with a drink in their hand. This is the dark side of fame, the actors who were completely wasted at all times. John Barrymore. He wasn't just a star, he was Hollywood's first great alcoholic. Long before rehab was an option, he drank himself into a joke. Studios covered for him at first, but by the end, even they couldn't save him. In the 1920s, Barrymore was on top of the world. He had the looks, the voice, and the talent. But off camera, he was rarely sober. His drinking got so bad that directors had to feed him lines off camera because he couldn't remember them. Some days, he couldn't even stand up straight and had to be held up by crew members just to finish a scene. Everyone in Hollywood knew he had a problem. He showed up drunk, stayed drunk, and somehow still got roles, at first. But things fell apart quickly. One night during a live performance, he completely blanked out. Instead of trying to recover, he turned to the audience and slurred, "Line, please?" The show was shut down early, and from then on, everyone knew Barrymore wasn't the same actor anymore. By the 1930s, his drinking wrecked his career. Studios didn't want to risk hiring him, and directors stopped covering for him. Even when friends tried to help, he kept drinking. His body started shutting down, shaking hands, failing memory, and a career in free fall. It wasn't just his career that crumbled. His personal life was a mess. He burned through marriages, lost his fortune, and ruined friendships. He was once considered one of the greatest actors of his time, but by the end he was a cautionary tale. The final years? A disaster. He was broke, sick, and barely able to work. Friends had to help pay his bills, but nothing could stop him from drinking himself to death. And if you think Hollywood let him rest in peace, think again. His so-called friends stole his corpse as a prank, dragging his lifeless body around for one last drunken joke. Barrymore was the blueprint for Hollywood self-destruction. He was the first major star to drink himself into oblivion, but he wouldn't be the last. W.C. Fields. While most stars tried to hide their drinking, Fields didn't even bother. He carried a thermos full of gin everywhere, labeled with innocent words like pineapple juice or orange soda. Everyone knew what was inside, but no one dared to stop him. By the time he made it big in Hollywood, Fields was already a heavy drinker. He had spent years in vaudeville, performing night after night while nursing a constant buzz. Drinking was part of his personality, both on and off screen. He played lovable drunks in films, but behind the scenes he was far from charming when the alcohol took over. His drinking got so bad that directors had to shoot around his hangovers. Mornings were a lost cause. He was either too sick or still drunk. By afternoon, he'd start sipping from his juice thermos just to get through filming. Some days he was so hammered that he slurred entire scenes, forcing multiple retakes. Other times he skipped set entirely, leaving studios scrambling to explain his absence. Fields had a sharp wit, but when he drank, his temper flared. He'd curse out producers, insult his co-stars, and storm off set if something didn't go his way. His drinking wore down his body over time. His once sharp comedic timing started slipping, and so did his health. By the 1940s, his body was failing him. His liver was shot, and doctors warned him that if he didn't quit drinking, he wouldn't last much longer. But Fields didn't care. Instead of quitting, he had a liquor stash built into his hospital room. Nurses would find hidden bottles of whiskey under his mattress, and he'd sneak drinks when no one was looking. He drank until his final breath. When Fields died in 1946, people weren't surprised. His liver had given up long before he did. His career was legendary, but so was his drinking. And unlike other stars, he never tried to pretend otherwise. W.C. Fields wasn't just drunk all the time, he made sure everyone knew it. Errol Flynn. He was the ultimate movie hero, dashing, fearless, and always up for an adventure. But off-screen, he was a reckless alcoholic who drank so much that even Hollywood couldn't keep up with him. If there was a bottle around, Flynn was already ahead of the game. Flynn's drinking wasn't just a bad habit, it was his lifestyle. He'd start his day with champagne, switch to hard liquor by lunch, and keep going until he passed out. Studios tried to hide it, but his drinking made productions a nightmare. He slurred his lines, stumbled through action scenes, and sometimes needed to be propped up just to finish filming. During The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, he was so drunk during fight scenes that stunt doubles had to take over more than usual. In They Died with Their Boots On, 1941, he kept falling off his horse because he couldn't stay balanced. Directors grew frustrated, but Flynn's star power kept him employed, at least for a while. His drinking wasn't just for fun. Flynn was self-medicating, drowning out personal demons with endless bottles of rum and whiskey. He was constantly in legal trouble, facing accusations of assault and scandalous affairs. His court cases became just as famous as his movies, but instead of slowing down, he drank even harder. By the 1950s, Hollywood had enough. Studios stopped covering for him, and his reputation crashed. His once chiseled looks were puffed and bloated from years of heavy drinking. His liver was failing, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. In 1959, Flynn's body finally gave up. At just 50 years old, he died of a massive heart attack, but doctors found his organs were destroyed from years of alcohol abuse. His liver was so damaged that they said it looked like he belonged to an 80-year-old man. Flynn was Hollywood's original bad boy, but his addiction was his downfall. He lived fast, drank hard, and never made it to old age. If Hollywood was a party, Flynn drank until the lights went out. Richard Burton. He was a functioning alcoholic who drank his way through nearly every movie he made. Unlike others who tried to hide it, Burton showed up wasted on set and still delivered Oscar-worthy performances. But behind the scenes, his addiction controlled everything. Burton's drinking started early. By his 20s, he was already downing multiple bottles of liquor a day. Success only made it worse. He became one of Hollywood's highest-paid actors, but with that fame came an endless supply of booze. During Cleopatra, 1963, where he met Elizabeth Taylor, he was drunk in nearly every scene. The two fueled each other's addictions, turning their romance into a storm of booze, fights, and makeups. His drinking was legendary. He once chugged 3 bottles of vodka before noon, then went straight to filming like nothing happened. Some directors learned to work around it, shooting scenes early in the day before he got too drunk. Others just gave up, letting Burton slur his way through takes. By the 1970s, his addiction took its toll. His once powerful voice turned hoarse, his sharp looks faded, and his body started breaking down. He tried quitting. Doctors warned him he was drinking himself to death, but every attempt ended the same way: back at the bar. Burton died in 1984 at just 58 years old. His liver was completely shot, and his body was wrecked from decades of drinking. He left behind a legacy of brilliant performances, but also a reputation as one of Hollywood's most tragic drunks. Unlike others who drank themselves out of a career, Burton somehow kept going, but his addiction won in the end. Peter O'Toole. He was a Hollywood legend, but he was also rarely sober. He built a career on charm, wit, and raw talent, while drinking so much that he sometimes couldn't remember filming entire movies. O'Toole's drinking started early. By the time he became famous in Lawrence of Arabia, 1962, he was already drinking more than his body could handle. He was known to down multiple bottles of whiskey in a single night, then show up to set the next morning like nothing happened, until it started affecting his work. His reputation as a drunken genius followed him everywhere. He would slur through scenes, forget his lines, or suddenly fall asleep in the middle of filming. On Goodbye, Mr. Chips, 1969, production shut down multiple times because he was too wasted to work. In interviews, he later admitted, "I have no memory of making some films." His drinking wasn't just a problem for Hollywood. It nearly killed him. In the 1970s, doctors found that years of alcohol abuse had destroyed his stomach lining, leading to internal bleeding and emergency surgery. They told him if he didn't stop drinking, he wouldn't survive. O'Toole tried to quit, but never fully gave it up. He continued acting, but his wild behavior and heavy drinking kept him from reaching his full potential. Even later in life, when he claimed to be sober, people doubted it. His reputation was too legendary. He lived longer than most Hollywood drunks, making it to 81, but his body was wrecked from decades of drinking. When he died in 2013, fans remembered him as a brilliant actor, but also one of Hollywood's most infamous alcoholics. Peter O'Toole didn't just drink, he turned it into an art form. Oliver Reed. His reputation for out-drinking entire bars made him a legend, but it also destroyed his career and eventually his life. Reed's drinking was on another level. He didn't just sip whiskey between takes, he chugged entire bottles. He once challenged 5 Royal Navy sailors to a drinking contest and won, downing over 100 pints of beer in a single session. By the end, he had to be carried out unconscious. On set, he was a nightmare and a spectacle. Directors never knew if they were getting a world-class actor or a slurring disaster. During The Three Musketeers, 1973, he showed up so drunk that he could barely stand. He got through the scenes, but barely. By the 1980s, his drinking had wrecked his reputation. Studios didn't want the risk, and his career spiraled downward. But the real tragedy came during Gladiator, 2000. Reed had been given one last shot at a big role playing Proximo, but instead of staying focused, he went on one final drinking spree. While filming in Malta, he downed 8 pints of beer, 12 shots of rum, half a bottle of whiskey, and a few doubles of cognac, all in one sitting. That night, he collapsed and died of a massive heart attack. His death was so sudden that the film had to use CGI to finish his scenes. Reed had drunk himself to his own tragic ending. Oliver Reed's drinking wasn't just a problem, it was his identity. He outlived many of Hollywood's legendary drunks, but in the end, alcohol still won. Mickey Rourke. He had everything: looks, talent, and a rising career. But instead of building on it, he drank, fought, and burned every bridge in Hollywood. His downfall wasn't just alcohol, but it played a massive role in his destruction. In the 1980s, Rourke was unstoppable. Movies like 9.5 Weeks and Angel Heart made him one of Hollywood's most in-demand actors. But behind the scenes, he was drinking heavily, getting into bar fights, and making himself unhireable. Directors hated working with him because he was either too drunk to perform or too aggressive to control. His drinking wasn't just a problem on set, it ruined his personal life. He trashed relationships, got arrested multiple times, and became known as Hollywood's biggest liability. Instead of cleaning up, he walked away from acting and became a professional boxer, a move that only made things worse. Boxing destroyed his face, but he still drank through the pain. By the late 90s, he was broke, washed up, and completely forgotten by Hollywood. Even he admitted, "I was drinking myself to death." He lost roles, lost friends, and almost lost his life. But somehow, Rourke pulled off a comeback. He got sober, repaired some of the damage, and landed The Wrestler, 2008, a film that mirrored his own self-destructive past. It earned him an Oscar nomination, but even with success, he struggled to stay clean. Mickey Rourke should have been one of Hollywood's greatest legends. Instead, alcohol and bad choices turned him into a cautionary tale. Even today, he's a reminder of how fast Hollywood can chew you up if you let it. Dennis Hopper. He was Hollywood's ultimate wild card. For decades, he was either too drunk, too high, or too unhinged to function. Somehow, he still delivered legendary performances, even when he could barely stand upright. Hopper's drinking started early, but by the time he became famous in Easy Rider, 1969, it was out of control. He drank on set, between takes, and sometimes during filming. He was so wasted while directing the last movie, 1971, that the film became an incoherent disaster, and Hollywood blacklisted him for nearly a decade. During Apocalypse Now, 1979, Hopper was so drunk and coked out that he couldn't remember his lines. Director Francis Ford Coppola had to feed him one sentence at a time because giving him a full script was pointless. Somehow, his manic energy worked for the role, but off-screen, he was a walking train wreck. Hopper's reputation was legendary, but his career kept crashing and burning. He spent most of the 80s either too wasted to work or banned from Hollywood entirely. At his lowest, he lived in the desert, talking to himself and drinking until he hallucinated. He later admitted he was drinking 28 beers, a bottle of whiskey, and doing 3 grams of cocaine every day. Then, out of nowhere, he got sober. In 1986, he made an insane comeback with Blue Velvet, playing one of the most terrifying villains in film history. This time, the madness was acting, not alcohol. Dennis Hopper drank his way through decades of Hollywood, burning bridges and ruining opportunities. But unlike most stars on this list, he actually cleaned up and made it back. His career should have been over, but somehow he outlived his own chaos. Christopher Hitchens. He was Hollywood adjacent, a constant presence in interviews, debates, and film discussions, always with a drink in hand. Unlike most people on this list, he didn't try to hide it. In fact, he embraced his alcoholism and made it part of his public persona. Hitchens drank like it was his job. Mornings started with scotch or wine, and by afternoon he'd moved on to whiskey, vodka, or whatever was available. He once admitted that he was never fully sober past lunchtime. His friends, colleagues, and even his enemies knew that if you were meeting Hitchens, you were meeting Hitchens and his drink. Despite being constantly buzzed, he was brilliant. His ability to debate, write, and command attention never seemed to suffer, at least on the surface. He could drink glass after glass of whiskey, then go on live TV and verbally dismantle his opponents. His mind was razor sharp, even when his liver wasn't. But make no mistake, his drinking had consequences. Friends noticed his once strong voice becoming raspier, his famous wit sometimes losing its edge. He started to look tired, worn down. Years of chain smoking and drinking finally caught up to him. In 2010, he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, the kind that heavy drinking and smoking practically guarantee. Doctors told him to quit, but he didn't see the point. He once joked that if he had his life to live over again, he would drink more, not less. Even as his body failed him, Hitchens kept writing, debating, and of course, drinking. He saw no reason to stop. It was who he was. In 2011, at 62 years old, he passed away, leaving behind a legacy of brilliant writing, sharp debates, and a lifetime of liquor-fueled intellect. Unlike Hollywood stars who drank themselves into oblivion, Hitchens never spiraled out of control, but his addiction still killed him. He was proof that even the smartest minds aren't invincible when alcohol is in the mix. Nicolas Cage. Unlike the other names on this list, he is still standing, but his reputation as Hollywood's modern-day wildcard has been fueled by years of alcohol, erratic behavior, and bizarre public meltdowns. If old-school stars drank their way into oblivion, Nicolas Cage has drunk his way into internet legend. Cage wasn't always Hollywood's unhinged meme king. In the 90s and early 2000s, he was an A-list actor with an Oscar, blockbuster hits, and critical respect. But behind the scenes, his drinking was getting out of control. Directors noticed his slurred speech, co-stars saw his erratic moods, and soon his performances started getting weirder and more unpredictable. Then, the public meltdowns started. In 2011, Cage was arrested in New Orleans for public drunkenness and disturbing the peace, after getting into a shouting match with his wife. Reports claimed he was stumbling, screaming, and too wasted to control himself. A few years later, he was caught drunkenly singing Prince's Purple Rain at a karaoke bar, so hammered that he could barely stand. The drinking wasn't just a personal issue. It wrecked his finances, too. Cage went on a spending spree fueled by booze and bad decisions, blowing through $150 million on castles, private islands, a dinosaur skull, and a pet octopus. When the IRS came knocking, he had to take every role he could get, leading to the infamous era of low-budget, straight-to-DVD Cage movies. Despite the chaos, Cage never fully collapsed like the drunks of old Hollywood. Somehow, he kept delivering performances, sometimes brilliant, sometimes downright unhinged. His 2018 film Mandy reminded people why he was a star in the first place, and in 2021, Pig earned him some of the best reviews of his career. Unlike Barrymore, Flynn, or Reed, Cage hasn't drunk himself into an early grave. Yet. But his booze-fueled antics, erratic career, and bizarre public breakdowns make him the closest thing modern Hollywood has to an old-school drunken disaster. Whether he crashes completely or somehow reinvents himself again, one thing is certain: Nicolas Cage is never boring.
Behind the red carpet lies a darker side of fame. Hollywood icons revered by millions, caught in the most jaw-dropping drunken scandals. From Errol Flynn's wild escapades to Robert Downey Jr.'s struggles, uncover the secrets the stars tried to hide. This is the real Hollywood. Errol Flynn's Wild Nights, 1940s. An iconic actor of the 1940s known for his swashbuckling roles in films like The Adventures of Robin Hood and Captain Blood, Errol Flynn was infamous for his off-screen antics. Flynn's penchant for heavy drinking and partying led to numerous scandals. One of the most notorious incidents occurred in 1942 when he was arrested for statutory rape involving two underage girls, Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterlee. Although he was acquitted, the trial brought his wild lifestyle into the spotlight. Flynn's behavior was a staple of Hollywood gossip columns. He was often seen at bars and nightclubs, drinking excessively and getting into brawls. His favorite haunts included the famed Trocadero on the Sunset Strip and the Macambo nightclub, where he would often be found in the company of fellow actors and high-profile socialites. Flynn's notorious parties at his Mulholland Drive estate, nicknamed Cirrhosis by the Sea, were legendary for their debauchery, attracting Hollywood's elite and often ending in chaos. His autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways detailed many of these exploits, cementing his reputation as one of Hollywood's original bad boys. The book provides a vivid account of his hedonistic lifestyle, including tales of drunken escapades and romantic entanglements. Flynn once reportedly quipped, "I like my whiskey old and my women young," a line that epitomized his carefree and often reckless approach to life. Despite his personal life, Flynn continued to have a successful career. He starred in several notable films during the 1940s, including They Died with Their Boots On and Gentleman Jim. Spencer Tracy's Struggles with Alcohol, 1950s. One of Hollywood's most respected actors, Spencer Tracy battled alcoholism for much of his life. Known for his roles in classics like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and Inherit the Wind, Tracy's drinking often affected his work. In the 1950s, his struggle became more apparent, with multiple incidents of public intoxication. One particularly notable event occurred in 1953 when Tracy was found passed out in the lobby of the Beverly Hills Hotel after a night of heavy drinking. His drinking affected his health and led to several hospitalizations. He often experienced severe hangovers and dehydration, requiring medical attention. Tracy's longtime companion, Katharine Hepburn, frequently stepped in to support him, even going so far as to monitor his drinking and assist him in his recovery efforts. Despite his struggles, Tracy's talent remained undeniable. He continued to deliver powerful performances in films such as Bad Day at Black Rock and The Old Man and the Sea. His ability to convey deep emotion and complexity in his characters made him a beloved figure in Hollywood. Directors admired his professionalism on set, even though they were aware of his battles with alcohol. Tracy's alcoholism strained his relationships with colleagues and affected his physical appearance. His once robust frame became increasingly frail, and his face showed the signs of heavy drinking. Yet, his performances never wavered in their intensity and brilliance. Hepburn once said of Tracy, "He was a drunk, but he was my drunk," highlighting her unwavering support and love for him despite his addiction. His addiction also took a toll on his family life. Tracy was separated from his wife Louise, although they never divorced, largely due to his Catholic faith. His children, John and Susie, were deeply affected by his alcoholism and the instability it brought to their lives. Judy Garland's troubled life, 1960s. The beloved star of The Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland had a tumultuous life marked by substance abuse. In the 1960s, her struggles with alcohol and prescription drugs became more pronounced. Garland's dependence on substances led to erratic behavior and numerous incidents of public intoxication. In 1964, Garland was found intoxicated and disoriented in a London hotel. She had to cancel several performances due to her condition. Her addiction issues were further exacerbated by the pressures of constant touring and financial difficulties. Despite attempts to rehabilitate her image, her addictions continued to plague her. Garland's manager, Stevie Phillips, described her as being so drunk she couldn't stand, highlighting the severity of her condition. Her substance abuse and deteriorating health made it difficult for her to secure stable work in the industry. Her once radiant voice and commanding stage presence were often overshadowed by her personal struggles. Nevertheless, Garland managed to deliver a few notable performances during this period, including a memorable concert at Carnegie Hall in 1961, which became a best-selling album and earned her a Grammy. Garland's relationships also suffered due to her addictions. She went through multiple marriages and divorces, each contributing to her emotional instability. Her children, including Liza Minnelli, often witnessed her struggles, adding a layer of familial tension to her already chaotic life. Garland's attempts at sobriety were frequent, but often short-lived, as the demands of her career and personal life repeatedly drove her back to substance use. Dean Martin's party persona, 1950s to 1970s. A member of the famous Rat Pack, Dean Martin was known for his smooth voice and charming on-screen presence. Off-screen, Martin cultivated a persona of the perpetual partygoer, often seen with a drink in hand. While some of his drinking was part of his act, Martin did have a penchant for alcohol. Throughout the 1950s to the 1970s, Martin's love for drinking was well documented. He often appeared on stage and television seemingly inebriated, playing into his laid-back, fun-loving image. His performances on The Dean Martin Show and the Dean Martin Celebrity Roasts featured him frequently sipping what appeared to be alcoholic beverages, adding to his carefree persona. This image was so convincing that many believed he was always under the influence, even though much of it was for show. Martin's association with the Rat Pack, alongside Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and others, only solidified his reputation as a hard-drinking entertainer. Their performances in Las Vegas were legendary for their humor, music, and revelry, with Martin often playing the role of the amiable drunk. Despite his heavy drinking, Martin maintained a successful career in music, film, and television. He starred in a series of popular films, including Some Came Running and Rio Bravo, and recorded numerous hit songs like Everybody Loves Somebody and Ain't That a Kick in the Head. Behind the scenes, Martin's drinking did have its limits. His daughter, Dina Martin, once said, "He liked to drink, but he knew his limits," suggesting that his onstage persona was partly an act. In reality, Martin was known to switch his whiskey glass for apple juice during performances to maintain his composure while still entertaining the crowd. Marlon Brando's off-screen drama, 1950s to 1970s. Celebrated for his roles in A Streetcar Named Desire and The Godfather, Marlon Brando was known for his unpredictable behavior and off-screen drama. In the 1950s, Brando's temperamental nature and disdain for Hollywood norms led to clashes with directors and producers. His personal life was equally chaotic, with numerous affairs and a penchant for excess. By the 1970s, Brando's behavior became even more erratic, with reports of heavy drinking and weight gain affecting his performances. Despite these issues, his talent kept him in demand, although his career was marked by these tumultuous periods. One of Brando's most infamous episodes occurred in 1953 during the filming of The Wild One. Known for his method acting, Brando immersed himself fully into the rebellious character he portrayed. Off-screen, he continued this behavior, frequently getting into altercations and showing up drunk on set. His clashes with director Laszlo Benedek and other crew members became legendary, further cementing his reputation as difficult but brilliant. In the 1960s, Brando's heavy drinking became more public. While filming Mutiny on the Bounty in Tahiti in 1962, his off-screen antics caused significant delays and budget overruns. He would often disappear for days, indulging in alcohol-fueled parties that disrupted the production. His unpredictable behavior led to frequent arguments with the film's director, Louis Milestone, and the studio, which struggled to keep the project on track. By the 1970s, Brando's erratic behavior and physical decline were evident. His performance in The Godfather was critically acclaimed, yet behind the scenes, his unpredictable actions and excessive drinking caused tension. His weight gain and lack of discipline were issues that directors had to navigate delicately. On the set of Last Tango in Paris, director Bernardo Bertolucci had to manage Brando's erratic schedule and moods, often exacerbated by his drinking. Elizabeth Taylor's tumultuous love life, 1950s to 1970s. Known for her roles in Cleopatra and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Elizabeth Taylor was as famous for her tumultuous personal life as she was for her acting. Throughout the 1950s to the 1970s, Taylor's numerous marriages and publicized affairs made headlines. Her relationship with Richard Burton, fueled by passion and alcohol, was particularly notable. The two married and divorced twice, with their fiery relationship often playing out in the public eye. Taylor's struggles with substance abuse, including alcohol and prescription drugs, further complicated her personal life and career. One of the most infamous incidents highlighting Taylor's issues with alcohol occurred during the filming of Cleopatra in the early 1960s. Taylor and Burton's on-set affair, fueled by their heavy drinking, became a public scandal. The media frenzy surrounding their relationship overshadowed the film itself. Paparazzi frequently captured the couple leaving bars and nightclubs in a drunken stupor, fueling tabloid stories and public fascination with their tumultuous romance. Another notable episode happened in 1974 when Taylor and Burton were dining at the Dorchester Hotel in London. Both had been drinking heavily, and a heated argument ensued which quickly escalated into a loud and public confrontation. The incident ended with Taylor throwing a glass of wine in Burton's face. Such public displays of their volatile relationship, often exacerbated by alcohol, became a regular spectacle for the press, and further cemented their reputations as Hollywood's most tempestuous couple. Peter O'Toole's legendary drinking, 1960s. Peter O'Toole, known for his iconic role in Lawrence of Arabia, was famous for his heavy drinking throughout the 1960s. His off-screen escapades were as legendary as his performances. One night in 1963, O'Toole and fellow actor Richard Harris reportedly drank their way through several London pubs, ending in a drunken brawl that required police intervention. O'Toole himself recounted in an interview, "I did quite enjoy the taste of alcohol a lot, and there were nights when I would drink a bar dry. His drinking was so notorious that in one incident he was found passed out in a public fountain in Rome. This wild lifestyle often led to outrageous antics that became the stuff of Hollywood legend, like the time he supposedly rode a camel through the streets of Dublin after a night of heavy drinking. Despite his wild behavior, O'Toole's talent kept him in high demand. Directors and producers were willing to overlook his off-screen antics because of his exceptional acting abilities. He delivered powerful performances in films such as Beckett and The Lion in Winter, earning him critical acclaim and several Academy Award nominations. However, his drinking began to take a toll on his health and reputation. He was known to show up on set late or inebriated, causing frustration among his colleagues. O'Toole's drinking also led to numerous health issues. He underwent surgery in the late 1970s for pancreatitis, a condition exacerbated by his excessive alcohol consumption. His doctors warned him that he had to stop drinking if he wanted to live, which prompted him to significantly reduce his alcohol intake. Despite these challenges, O'Toole continued to act, delivering memorable performances well into his later years. Richard Burton's Public Drunkenness, 1970s. Another star of the 1960s and 70s, Richard Burton was infamous for his public bouts of drunkenness. Known for his turbulent relationship with Elizabeth Taylor, their fights were often fueled by alcohol. In 1974, during a visit to London, Burton was seen staggering out of a bar, barely able to walk. One notable incident occurred in 1975 when Burton was ejected from a theater after causing a scene during a performance. According to witnesses, he was shouting incoherently and had to be physically removed. The media had a field day, and the story was splashed across headlines. This public humiliation highlighted the extent of his alcohol dependency and its impact on his public image. Burton's drinking habits were well documented and became part of his public persona. He was often seen with a drink in hand at social events, parties, and even on film sets. His penchant for alcohol not only strained his relationships but also affected his professional life. Directors and co-stars often had to contend with his unpredictable behavior and frequent absences due to his drinking binges. Despite these incidents, Burton continued to work. Though his excessive drinking affected his performances and health, his once powerful voice and commanding presence began to wane, and his roles became less frequent and less prominent. He starred in several notable films during this period, including The Exorcist II, The Heretic, and Equus, but his performances were often overshadowed by his off-screen antics. Burton's health deteriorated significantly due to his drinking. He suffered from liver cirrhosis and other alcohol-related illnesses, leading to multiple hospitalizations. Despite the toll on his body, Burton seemed resigned to his fate. He once said, "I was drunk for years. I was happy drunk," reflecting a sense of acceptance and perhaps denial of the severe consequences of his lifestyle. John Belushi's Party Lifestyle, 1980s. The beloved star of Animal House and the Blues Brothers, John Belushi had a reputation for hard partying that ultimately led to his tragic end. In the early 1980s, Belushi's drug and alcohol use was spiraling out of control. Known for his larger-than-life personality, Belushi often indulged in wild parties, which were infamous for their excess and debauchery. Belushi's reckless lifestyle came to a devastating halt in March 1982 when he was found dead in his bungalow at the Chateau Marmont Hotel in Los Angeles. The coroner's report revealed a lethal combination of cocaine and heroin, often referred to as a speedball. His sudden death at the age of 33 shocked the entertainment world and highlighted the dangers of Hollywood's party lifestyle. Belushi's struggle with substance abuse was well known among his friends and colleagues. Efforts were made to help him curb his addictions, but his escalating use of drugs and alcohol made it increasingly difficult. Mickey Rourke's downward spiral, late 1980s. A rising star in the 1980s with films like 9½ Weeks and Angel Heart, Mickey Rourke saw his career nosedive due to his off-screen behavior. In 1989, Rourke was arrested for public intoxication after a bar fight in Los Angeles. Witnesses described the scene as chaotic, with Rourke shouting and throwing punches. This incident was just one of many that highlighted his turbulent lifestyle. Rourke's behavior led to a reputation as a difficult and unreliable actor. Directors were hesitant to work with him, and his career suffered as a result. His erratic actions on set and frequent altercations with co-stars further tarnished his professional image. Rourke later admitted in interviews that his drinking and aggressive behavior were a form of self-destruction. "I was on a path of destruction, and alcohol was my fuel," he said. The late 1980s and 1990s were marked by a series of personal and professional setbacks for Rourke. His marriage to actress Deborah Fewer ended in divorce, and his subsequent relationships were equally tumultuous. His struggles with alcohol and substance abuse continued, leading to more arrests and a further decline in his career. The once promising actor found himself increasingly marginalized in Hollywood, with fewer roles being offered. Rourke's passion for boxing, which he had pursued before becoming an actor, resurfaced during this period. He returned to the ring in the early 1990s, hoping to escape his troubled acting career and personal demons. Although he achieved some success as a boxer, the sport took a physical toll on his body and further isolated him from the film industry. It wasn't until the 2000s that Rourke began to turn his life around. He sought therapy and gradually reduced his alcohol consumption. His comeback role in The Wrestler, 2008, marked a significant turning point, earning him critical acclaim and a Golden Globe Award. Despite his redemption arc, the damage to his career from his earlier behavior was significant and took years to repair. Robert Downey Jr. struggles, 1990. In the early 90s, Robert Downey Jr. was known for his incredible talent and growing career. However, his substance abuse issues became public knowledge in 1996 when he was arrested in Malibu. Found under the influence of drugs, he was driving erratically and speeding down Sunset Boulevard. Police found heroin, cocaine, and a .357 Magnum revolver in his car. Downey's arrest shocked the entertainment industry and his fans. His talent had been widely recognized, and he had been on a promising career trajectory with roles in films like Less Than Zero and Chaplin, for which he received an Academy Award nomination. The incident in Malibu, however, marked the beginning of a very public struggle with addiction. Downey later said in a court hearing, "It's like I have a shotgun in my mouth, and I've got my finger on the trigger, and I like the taste of gunmetal," poignantly describing the grip addiction had on him. Despite repeated attempts at rehabilitation, his struggle with addiction continued. Between 1996 and 2001, Downey was arrested several times, each incident marking a significant low in his career. His arrests included a 1997 incident where he was found passed out in a neighbor's home, and a 1999 incident where he missed a court-ordered drug test, resulting in a jail sentence. His recurring legal issues led to his being fired from the television series Ally McBeal, a significant blow given his acclaimed performance on the show. The once bright star saw his career prospects dim, as Hollywood studios and producers became increasingly reluctant to work with him due to his unpredictability and legal troubles. Throughout these years, Downey's talent remained evident, but his addiction overshadowed his professional achievements. His relationships also suffered, with his first marriage to Deborah Falconer ending in divorce partly due to his substance abuse problems. Despite the support of friends and family, Downey's path to recovery was fraught with setbacks. Some of the old-time Hollywood celebrities were into stuff you wouldn't believe, from having weird obsessions with scat
It is Austin.
to something as bizarre as an irrational fear for the color purple. There is no denying the fact that most of what you're about to be exposed to make absolutely no sense. Charles Laughton's weird diet. In his memoir, Full Service, My Adventures in Hollywood and the Sex Lives of the Stars, Scotty Bowers claims to have either slept with or arranged sexual liaisons for hundreds of the best-known celebrities during Hollywood's golden age. One of the most shocking stories involves British actor Charles Laughton. But that's not all. According to Bowers, Laughton once asked him to bring over a young male guest while his wife was out. When Bowers and the young man arrived, Laughton began making a sandwich. He carefully sliced up lettuce and tomatoes, arranged them on sourdough bread, added a bit of lemon juice, and sprinkled some salt and pepper. This is where it gets interesting.
After a few minutes of prep work, Lawton took the bread slices in one hand, picked up a pot with the other, and asked the young man to follow him into the bathroom. But what happened next will shock you. Here's what Bowers describes. Charles was the first to return. He put the plate with the bread slices on the kitchen table. I could see that the lettuce and tomatoes had been lightly smeared with a light brown substance. Seconds later, Ted appeared in the kitchen. His erection was gone, and he was looking decidedly sheepish, perhaps even a trifle embarrassed. I stared at him curiously, and he pulled a face, hoping that Charles wouldn't notice. He pointed at the bread slices on the plate and then lightly patted his backside. And then, believe it or not, Lawton ate the sandwich. Ronald Reagan's obsession with young virgins. Ronald Reagan is often remembered more for his political career than his time in Hollywood, but back in the 1940s and 50s he was one of Tinseltown's leading men. But that's not all. One of the most cringe-inducing rumors about Reagan's Hollywood days comes from his co-star in the 1950 drama Louisa, Piper Laurie. She claims that the future GOP icon took her virginity when he was 39 years old, and she was just 18. But what happened next will shock you. In her memoir, Laurie writes that Reagan first seduced her on the set of their film Louisa, where he played her father. At first, Reagan seemed like a true gentleman. He even asked Laurie's mother for permission to take her on a date. Sounds charming, right? But instead of the glamorous evening Laurie had imagined, Reagan took both her and her mother to his house, where he cooked hamburger steak and salad. This is where it gets interesting. After dinner, things took a strange turn. Reagan led Laurie back to the bedroom. According to her, the actor was an insensitive show-off in bed. He bragged about how long he'd been erect, 40 whole minutes, and how much his condom had cost. But that's not all. Laurie also recounts that Reagan was far from a considerate lover. Not only did he fail to pleasure her, but when she mentioned her lack of an orgasm, his response was harsh and critical. According to her, he said, "There's something wrong with you that you should fix." Howard Hughes's extreme obsession with hygiene. Howard Hughes, the brilliant yet enigmatic tycoon, had a mind that worked in extraordinary ways. His achievements in aviation, film, and business were nothing short of legendary. But alongside his brilliance, there was a peculiar and relentless obsession that dominated his life. Cleanliness. Imagine a man so consumed by the fear of germs that he would lock himself away in dark rooms for days, sometimes even weeks. Hughes turned his lavish homes into fortresses of solitude, meticulously sealed to keep out any potential contamination. The windows were often covered, creating a gloomy, almost eerie atmosphere, as if he were living in a perpetual twilight. Hughes's hand-washing routine was nothing short of ritualistic. Picture this. He would wash his hands repeatedly, scrubbing them until they were raw and sometimes even bleeding. It wasn't just a quick rinse. It was a painstaking process, as if he were trying to scrub away invisible threats. His fear of germs was so intense that he believed even the slightest contact could lead to illness or infection. But Hughes's obsession didn't stop at hand-washing. He went to extraordinary lengths to avoid human contact altogether. For instance, if he had to meet someone, he would often communicate through notes or intercom systems, avoiding face-to-face interactions. He would use tissues to touch objects and had a meticulous system for handling everyday items to ensure they remained uncontaminated. Hughes's peculiarities extended to his instructions to staff and associates. He once demanded that all canned food be meticulously washed and scrubbed before opening. Imagine the bewilderment of his staff as they followed these bizarre instructions, knowing that any deviation could trigger one of Hughes's infamous outbursts. Even when he was flying, Hughes couldn't escape his fears. His custom-built planes were designed with his germophobia in mind. He often flew alone or with minimal crew, ensuring that the aircraft remained as sterile as possible. The irony of an aviation pioneer afraid of the very air he conquered is striking, isn't it? Hughes's obsession with cleanliness and germs was a constant battle in his mind. Despite his towering intellect and achievements, he was trapped by his own fears. This relentless battle between his rational, inventive side and his irrational, obsessive side created a fascinating yet tragic figure. The man who soared to great heights in both the literal and metaphorical sense was, in many ways, grounded by his own mind. Mae West's astrology obsession. Mae West, a name synonymous with boldness and wit, was a star who dazzled both on and off the screen. But behind her larger-than-life persona and sultry quips lay a fascination that guided many of her choices. Astrology. Mae West was deeply obsessed with astrology. This wasn't just a casual interest or a passing fancy, it was a central pillar of her decision-making process. Imagine a woman who, despite her confidence and unshakable self-assuredness, would not make any major life decisions without first consulting her astrologer. Whether it was a career move, a personal relationship, or even the timing of her day-to-day activities, the stars had to align for Mae. Her belief in astrology was so profound that it influenced her creative work. She wrote a play called The Constant Sinner, which was steeped in astrological themes. The narrative wasn't just a backdrop for her characters. It was interwoven with the celestial movements and zodiac signs that Mae believed so deeply in. This wasn't just art imitating life. It was life, love, and destiny dictated by the cosmos. Think about the confidence and assertiveness Mae West exuded in every role she played and every public appearance she made. Now imagine that same woman, with all her bravado, quietly consulting her astrologer in private, seeking guidance from the alignment of planets and stars. It's a striking contrast, isn't it? The idea that such a powerful figure would defer to celestial charts and predictions adds a fascinating layer to her already complex persona. Astrology wasn't just a hobby for Mae West, it was a way of life. She saw the patterns and signs as a roadmap, helping her navigate the tumultuous landscape of Hollywood and her personal life. This deep-rooted belief in the stars provided her with a sense of control and direction, a way to make sense of the often unpredictable nature of fame and fortune. Marlene Dietrich and collecting men's clothes. Beyond her screen persona, Marlene had an intriguing obsession that set her apart from her contemporaries, a fascination with men's clothing. This wasn't just a passing fancy or a quirky interest. It was a profound passion that influenced both her personal life and her public image. Dietrich didn't merely collect men's clothing, she wore it with a sense of ease and confidence that challenged the norms of her time. In an era when women were expected to adhere to strict fashion conventions, Dietrich's choice to don suits, trousers, and tailored shirts was nothing short of revolutionary. Picture her walking into a Hollywood event in a perfectly fitted tuxedo, her hair meticulously styled, and her makeup flawless. The image was striking and unforgettable, making a powerful statement about gender and fashion. She was one of the first women to popularize androgynous fashion in Hollywood. Her style wasn't about rejecting femininity, but about embracing a broader spectrum of identity. By wearing men's clothing, Dietrich played with societal expectations, blending masculinity and femininity in a way that was both provocative and liberating. She made it clear that clothing was an expression of self, not a strict adherence to gender norms. Dietrich's fascination with men's clothing went beyond the surface. She appreciated the craftsmanship, the structure, and the way these garments allowed her to move and present herself. Collecting these pieces became a hobby, a form of self-expression, and a way to assert her individuality. Imagine her private wardrobe, filled with an array of perfectly tailored suits, each piece carefully chosen and cherished. Her influence extended far beyond her personal collection. Dietrich's androgynous style inspired countless designers and fashion enthusiasts, paving the way for future generations to explore and embrace non-traditional fashion choices. She wasn't just a style icon. She was a pioneer who challenged the fashion industry's rigid boundaries. Peter Sellers' obsession against the color purple. Most people have typical fears like heights, snakes, or spiders, but Peter Sellers, he had a bizarre terror of the color purple. Now, Sellers' eccentricity wasn't the lovable, bumbling kind he often portrayed in his roles. It was far more chaotic and disturbing, making him a difficult person to be around. On film sets, Sellers was infamous for his explosive outbursts. Imagine him in a fit of rage, yelling at his wives, smashing dishes, and even brandishing a shotgun to vent his anger. His tantrums didn't stop there. He clashed with directors and producers, despite their higher status, and would often get lower-level staff fired if they crossed him. His erratic behavior was compounded by his vague racism and intense superstitions. One superstition in particular involved the famed director Vittorio De Sica. While they were working on After the Fox, Sellers saw De Sica berate a script girl for wearing purple. The director ominously declared that purple was the color of death. This statement profoundly impacted Sellers, who became convinced that the color purple could kill. From then on, Sellers' fear of purple dominated his actions. Any time he encountered the color, he'd fly into a panic, throwing tantrums and insisting it be removed. This irrational fear added yet another layer of unpredictability to an already volatile personality, making life around him a constant challenge. Charlie Chaplin's obsession with younger women. Charlie Chaplin, the legendary actor, filmmaker, and comedian, known for his iconic character, the Little Tramp, also had a much darker side to his personal life. Beyond the silver screen, Chaplin's relationships were the subject of much controversy, largely due to his well-known obsession with very young women. This fixation shaped his personal and professional life in ways that continue to spark debate. Chaplin's first marriage was to Mildred Harris in 1918, when he was 29 and she was just 16. Their relationship began when Harris was only 15, highlighting the significant age difference and Chaplin's preference for much younger partners. The marriage was short-lived, lasting only 2 years, but it set a precedent for Chaplin's future romantic endeavors. Following his divorce from Harris, Chaplin embarked on a series of relationships with teenage girls. His second marriage was to Leda Gray, who was 16 when they started their relationship and 18 when they married in 1924. Chaplin was 35 at the time. Their union was fraught with difficulties from the start. Gray's youth and inexperience clashed with Chaplin's controlling nature, leading to a tumultuous relationship that ended in a highly publicized and acrimonious divorce. The divorce proceedings revealed many sordid details about Chaplin's behavior, further cementing his controversial reputation. Despite the scandal, Chaplin continued to pursue young women. His third marriage was to Paulette Goddard, a rising star in Hollywood, who was 21 when they met, and Chaplin was 47. Though their marriage was kept relatively private and the age gap was not as stark as in his previous relationships, the pattern of significant age differences persisted. Chaplin's fourth and final marriage was to Una O'Neill, the daughter of playwright Eugene O'Neill. Una was just 18 when she married Chaplin, who was 54 at the time. This marriage, despite the age gap, proved to be the most stable and enduring of Chaplin's life. They remained together until Chaplin's death in 1977, and they had 8 children. Una's unwavering support and devotion seemed to bring Chaplin a semblance of the stability that had eluded him in his previous relationships. His preference for young women was not limited to his marriages. He was known to have numerous relationships with teenage girls throughout his life, often starting when the girls were still minors. This behavior, while not uncommon in the early 20th century, drew significant criticism and legal challenges. In one notable case, Chaplin faced a paternity suit from actress Joan Barry, who was 23 years younger than him. The case, which included allegations of coercion and manipulation, was widely covered by the media and further tarnished Chaplin's public image. The controversy surrounding Chaplin's relationships with young women has led to a complex legacy. On one hand, he is celebrated as a genius of early cinema, whose contributions to film and comedy are unparalleled. On the other hand, his personal life raises uncomfortable questions about the dynamics of power and exploitation. Chaplin's behavior reflects the broader societal attitudes of his time, where older men often pursued younger women, sometimes with dire consequences. Gloria Swanson's obsession with health and fasting. Gloria Swanson, one of Hollywood's most glamorous and enduring stars, was not only known for her striking beauty and acting prowess, but also for her intense dedication to health foods and fasting. Decades before the wellness industry became mainstream, Swanson was a pioneer in the realm of health and nutrition, turning her lifestyle into a fervent obsession that shaped her daily routines and public persona. Swanson's journey into the world of health foods and fasting began at a time when processed foods were becoming increasingly popular in America. Rejecting this trend, she delved into natural and organic eating habits, believing that what she consumed had a direct impact on her overall well-being and longevity. Her approach to diet was meticulous and uncompromising. She scrutinized every ingredient, ensuring that her meals were not only nutritious but also free from any artificial additives or preservatives. Her commitment to healthy foods extended beyond just eating organic produce. Swanson embraced a diet rich in raw vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds, long before such dietary choices became fashionable. She was particularly fond of juicing, often preparing fresh vegetable and fruit juices to maintain her energy and vitality. This dedication to a clean diet was not merely a fad for Swanson. It was a deeply ingrained lifestyle choice that she believed was essential for sustaining her health and beauty. In addition to her strict dietary habits, Swanson was a firm believer in the benefits of fasting. She would often embark on long fasts, abstaining from food for extended periods to cleanse her body and mind. These fasts were not just about physical health. Swanson saw them as a way to achieve mental clarity and spiritual renewal. Her fasting routines were rigorous, sometimes lasting several days, during which she would consume only water or freshly squeezed juices. This practice was unconventional and even controversial at the time, but Swanson was unwavering in her belief in its benefits. Swanson's obsession with health foods and fasting was also evident in her social interactions and public appearances. She often spoke about her dietary practices, sharing her knowledge and experiences with others. She became an advocate for healthy living, encouraging those around her to adopt similar habits. Her influence extended to her close circle of friends and colleagues in Hollywood, many of whom were inspired by her dedication and began to explore healthier lifestyles themselves. Her commitment to health was not without its challenges. Swanson faced skepticism and criticism from those who viewed her practices as extreme or unnecessary. However, she remained steadfast, confident in the knowledge that her choices were beneficial. Her dedication to health and wellness was a testament to her discipline and determination, qualities that also defined her illustrious career. Swanson's approach to health was holistic. She believed in the interconnectedness of physical, mental, and emotional well-being. This belief guided her lifestyle choices, from her diet and fasting routines to her emphasis on regular exercise and stress management. She practiced yoga and meditation, long before these practices became popular in the West, as part of her daily regimen to maintain balance and harmony in her life. Her obsession with health foods and fasting also influenced her work. Swanson often took on roles that reflected her personal beliefs, portraying characters who embodied strength, resilience, and a sense of well-being. Her off-screen persona, as a health-conscious and disciplined individual, became an integral part of her public image, distinguishing her from many of her contemporaries.
Most people brush their teeth with toothpaste. She used champagne, not as a joke, not as a one-time dare. Every single day. Dentists warned her. She didn't care. Who was she? And why did she turn something so basic into a symbol of excess?
a woman unlike any other. Most people wouldn't dream of replacing water with champagne, but for one Hollywood legend, it was non-negotiable. She didn't just drink it at parties, she lived by it. Hydration, champagne, self-care, champagne, brushing her teeth, you guessed it, champagne. This wasn't a quirky habit she picked up later in life. The seeds of extravagance were planted early. Born into wealth and privilege, she never learned restraint. While most kids were taught discipline, she was encouraged to be exactly who she wanted to be, and what she wanted was everything. By the time she reached adolescence, her personality was already larger than life. She wasn't just rebellious, she was unstoppable. Teachers couldn't control her. Rules meant nothing. If a school didn't meet her expectations, she simply left or got expelled. Either way, it was her decision. Her parents, exasperated but indulgent, sent her to the most prestigious institutions they could find. Maybe structure would tame her. It didn't. The only lessons that stuck were the ones she wanted to learn: drama, literature, and, most importantly, the art of capturing attention. As a teenager, she discovered her greatest skill: commanding a room. It wasn't just about beauty or talent, it was presence. She had an effortless way of making everyone around her feel like they were in the presence of someone important, even if they couldn't quite explain why. That magnetism led her straight to the stage, Broadway to be exact. While other young women were being molded into obedient starlets, she did things her own way. She smoked, swore, and laughed louder than the men. She wasn't trying to fit in. She expected the world to adjust to her, and, incredibly, it did. The making of an icon. By the time she was in her early 20s, she had already conquered Broadway. Critics might have been divided on her wild behavior, but audiences couldn't get enough. She wasn't a polished, delicate starlet. She was unpredictable, electric, alive. Hollywood took notice. Studio heads weren't sure what to make of her. She was brash, unapologetic, and had a voice that could cut through a crowded room like a knife. But there was no denying her talent. She had that rare quality that made people lean in when she spoke, waiting for what she'd say next. She didn't audition for roles, she owned them. Directors knew that once she was on set, she wouldn't just read lines, she'd command the screen. Her charisma was so overpowering that co-stars often found themselves reduced to background noise. But Hollywood came with rules. It expected women to be demure, well-behaved, controlled. That wasn't her style. She drank, smoked, and swore like a sailor. She talked openly about things actresses weren't supposed to mention: sex, politics, money. And yet, studios couldn't resist her. They cleaned up her image in glossy magazine spreads, trying to sell her as another glamorous, sophisticated leading lady. But no matter how much makeup, lighting, or editing they applied, they couldn't erase the truth. She wasn't just acting. She was the role. Every part she played felt like an extension of herself. Fierce, unfiltered, magnetic. Audiences ate it up. But fame didn't change her. If anything, it made her more reckless. While other actresses carefully curated their images, she leaned into chaos. If reporters asked her a question, she answered with brutal honesty. If a party got dull, she found a way to liven it up, often with a dramatic entrance, an unexpected striptease, or a scandalous remark designed to make headlines. She wasn't just famous, she was notorious. And she didn't care. Hollywood wanted to control her. Instead, she made it clear she was going to play by her rules. And that was just the beginning. The Broadway takeover. Before Hollywood tried to tame her, Broadway was the perfect playground. There were no cameras to censor her, no studio heads demanding she behave, just a stage, an audience, and the raw energy she thrived on. She didn't just perform, she consumed the spotlight. Critics struggled to describe her. She wasn't graceful, but she was mesmerizing. She didn't deliver lines, she attacked them. Every performance felt spontaneous, as if she might change the entire script on a whim just to see what would happen. Audiences were hooked. They didn't just come to see the play, they came to see her. Would she show up sober? Would she insult a co-star mid-scene? Would she break the fourth wall just to mock a critic in the front row? Anything was possible. One night, when a fellow actor fumbled a line, she didn't cover for him. She doubled down. "Darling, if you can't remember the words, at least say something clever," she quipped, sending the audience into hysterics. That was her power. No one knew what she'd do next, and that unpredictability made her irresistible. Her reputation grew beyond the stage. New York nightlife belonged to her. She could outdrink the men, outwit the socialites, and outshine the biggest personalities of the era. If a party didn't include her, it wasn't worth attending. But Broadway wasn't enough. She wanted a bigger stage, and Hollywood was starting to realize that no matter how unruly she was money. Studios had seen her name in the papers too many times to ignore her. Even with the scandals, the rumors, and the endless stream of outrageous behavior, one thing was clear. When she was on stage, people watched. Hollywood's wildest star. When she arrived in Hollywood, she wasn't just another actress looking for a break. She was a Broadway legend with a reputation so big it could barely fit through the studio gates. Directors knew she was trouble. Producers knew she was unpredictable. But they also knew one thing. If they put her on screen, people would watch. Her first films proved what Broadway fans already knew. She wasn't just talented, she was electric. She didn't act so much as dominate the screen. Whether she played a seductress, a villain, or a tragic lead, audiences couldn't take their eyes off her. But Hollywood came with rules. Studios controlled their stars like products, dictating everything from their diets to their love lives. That wasn't going to happen with her. She refused to be molded into the typical Hollywood starlet. If they wanted her, they had to take all of her, scandal, sharp tongue, and champagne obsession included. And the champagne? It was everywhere. She drank it on set, kept bottles in her dressing room, and made sure every party had a steady supply. The stories about her started to sound impossible. She was rumored to have bathed in it, used it to wash her hair, and even brushed her teeth with it. Directors begged her to behave. She laughed in their faces. She was kicked off sets for arriving late, or sometimes not at all. She openly insulted the Hollywood elite, calling them dull and predictable. If a leading man annoyed her, she let him know, sometimes with words, sometimes by knocking back his drink in one gulp and walking away. The press couldn't get enough. Every headline was wilder than the last. Actress stirs up scandal at studio gala. Hollywood starlet's outrageous party leaves guests speechless. Leading lady prefers champagne to water. Dentists horrified. The studio system wasn't built for someone like her. They wanted obedient, polished stars who followed orders. She wasn't here to follow anything. Hollywood had created its own monster, and it had no idea how to contain her. Scandals, rumors, and unapologetic living. As her fame skyrocketed, so did the stories about her. Some were true, some exaggerated, and some so outrageous they sounded made up. Except with her, anything felt possible. She had no interest in hiding who she was. While other actresses carefully protected their images, she welcomed controversy. She spoke openly about sex, drank more than any of her male co-stars, and cursed like a sailor in an era when women were expected to be demure. The rumors fueled her legend. One of the most famous? She supposedly despised water so much that she replaced it entirely with champagne. Not just for drinking, she allegedly washed her face with it, rinsed her hair with it, and even brushed her teeth with it. When asked if it was true, she never denied it. Instead, she'd flash her signature grin and say, "Why ruin a good story with the truth?" Dentists warned her about the damage she was doing to her enamel. She didn't care. By this point, her reckless habits were as much a part of her persona as her performances. Beyond her personal indulgences, she had a habit of stirring up scandal in public. She made crude jokes in interviews, gave blunt opinions about her peers, and treated Hollywood's biggest events like her personal playground. Once, at a high society dinner, she reportedly took off her mink coat and revealed she wasn't wearing anything underneath. The film industry had never seen anyone like her. While other actresses played by the rules to maintain their careers, she seemed to thrive on breaking them. But it wasn't just rebellion for the sake of it. She was proving a point. She refused to be controlled. Of course, Hollywood had its limits, even for her. The industry tolerated her chaos as long as she was bringing in money, but how long could they let her run wild before the consequences caught up? At some point, even the biggest stars have to pay the price, and for her, the bill was about to arrive. The champagne obsession. By now, the stories about her were legendary, but nothing fascinated people more than Tallulah Bankhead's relationship with champagne. It wasn't just her drink of choice, it was practically a personality trait. While others reached for water to quench their thirst, she reached for a bottle of bubbly. She was never seen without a glass in hand. At parties, on film sets, even during interviews, it didn't matter. She once quipped, "I don't drink water. Fish do unspeakable things in it." That line alone cemented her reputation as Hollywood's most extravagant drinker. But the real shock came when rumors spread that Bankhead wasn't just drinking champagne, she was using it for hygiene. People whispered that she washed her hair with it, splashed it on her face as a toner, and, most bizarrely, brushed her teeth with it. When confronted with these rumors, she never gave a straight answer. Instead, she let the gossip swirl, knowing it only made her more infamous. But those close to her swore it wasn't a joke. She really did it. Dentists warned her. The acid in champagne was eroding her enamel, making her teeth vulnerable to decay. But she had little interest in medical advice. In fact, she dismissed health concerns altogether. If champagne was ruining her teeth, so be it. She had no plans to change. For her, champagne wasn't just a drink. It was a lifestyle. It represented indulgence, rebellion, and a refusal to conform. In a town obsessed with image, she refused to take anything seriously. And yet, her excess had a cost. The years of partying, drinking, and ignoring warnings were catching up. Hollywood had a way of chewing people up and spitting them out, and as much as she pretended to be untouchable, cracks were beginning to show. The price of extravagance. For years, she lived as if consequences didn't exist. Bankhead drank what she wanted, said what she wanted, and ignored every warning thrown her way. But excess always comes with a price, and she was starting to feel the bill. The long nights of drinking and partying were catching up. Her once effortless charm began to waver. The sharp wit that made her irresistible started turning against her. Some called it self-destruction. Others saw it as inevitable. Either way, Hollywood was watching her unravel. Physically, the toll was undeniable. The years of champagne abuse had done more than just fuel gossip. It had ruined her teeth. Those close to her claimed her enamel was wearing away, leading to painful dental issues. But when dentists urged her to stop, she laughed them off. The damage was already done. Professionally, the industry's patience was running thin. Hollywood had always been willing to tolerate bad behavior, as long as the box office numbers were good. But her unpredictability was becoming a liability. Showing up late was one thing. Not showing up at all was another. Directors dreaded working with her. Producers saw her as a financial risk. The same studios that once fought for her name on a marquee were now looking for safer options. And then there was the drinking. It had gone from a party trick to something darker. Friends noticed that the wild, rebellious spirit had been replaced with something more desperate. The industry loved a good scandal, but it had no patience for downward spirals. Bankhead was still a star. But in Hollywood, being a star wasn't enough. You had to be marketable, and she was slipping out of favor. The end of an era. She had spent years bending Hollywood to her will, refusing to conform, refusing to play by anyone's rules but her own. But by now the industry had moved on. The same rebellious spirit that once made her irresistible was now making her unhireable. Producers had grown tired of the unpredictability. Directors weren't willing to gamble on an actress who might show up late, or not at all. The studios that once cleaned up her messes were now looking for fresh faces, women who were easier to control, easier to sell. Bankhead hadn't changed, but Hollywood had. By the time the 1940s arrived, the industry was shifting. The wild excess of the previous decades was giving way to a more polished, controlled system. Starlets were expected to be elegant, refined, scandal-free. There was no room for someone who treated movie sets like an afterthought and press interviews like a personal comedy routine. Her roles started drying up. The scripts that once came pouring in slowed to a trickle, then stopped altogether. The clubs she once ruled were filling up with a younger crowd, people who whispered about her like she was a relic of another time. And then her body started failing her too. The years of indulgence had taken their toll. The champagne habit that had fueled her legend had also fueled her decline. Health issues became harder to ignore. The dentists had been right. Her teeth were in terrible shape. And the drinking wasn't just part of the act anymore. It was a crutch. Despite it all, Bankhead refused to be pitied. If people expected her to retreat into quiet obscurity, they were wrong. She still held court at parties, still delivered razor-sharp one-liners, still made headlines, even if the headlines weren't always flattering. But the truth was unavoidable. Hollywood had outgrown her. The enduring legend of an eccentric. She may have faded from Hollywood's spotlight, but she never faded from conversation. Even as her film career slowed, her legend only grew. The stories, the scandals, the infamous champagne obsession. People couldn't stop talking about Tallulah Bankhead. The new generation of actresses were carefully controlled, groomed to be flawless public figures. She had been anything but. In an industry that thrived on illusion, she was raw, unfiltered, and unapologetic. And for that, she became a different kind of icon. Even those who had never seen her films knew of her. She wasn't just another leading lady, she was a symbol of defiance. The woman who drank too much, spoke too freely, and laughed in the face of every expectation. The rumor that she brushed her teeth with champagne? It never died. It became part of her mythology, another outrageous detail in a life that felt too wild to be real. Some dismissed it as gossip, others swore it was true. She never confirmed or denied it. Why would she? The mystery was half the fun. Even in her later years, Bankhead refused to let the world forget her. While other aging actresses faded into quiet retirement, she stayed loud. She made shocking public appearances, threw extravagant parties, and gave interviews that made journalists question if they should even print what she said. Hollywood may have turned its back on her, but the public never did. They loved her, flaws and all. Her famous one-liners became legendary, endlessly quoted in books and articles. Her rebellious spirit inspired future stars who wished they could break free from Hollywood's tight grip the way she had. Of course, there were those who dismissed her, who said she was reckless, that she could have had a longer, more stable career if she had just played the game. But that was never an option. She had lived exactly how she wanted to, on her own terms, by her own rules. The Hollywood's untamed rebel. For decades, people have repeated the stories, the scandalous affairs, the razor-sharp wit, the wild parties, the woman who treated champagne like water, who defied every rule Hollywood tried to enforce. She wasn't just a star, she was a storm. Tallulah Bankhead didn't play the Hollywood game. She made her own rules and dared the industry to keep up. They tried for a while, but in the end, no one could tame her. Her disdain for water was as famous as her performances. The rumors that she brushed her teeth with champagne? They stuck because they seemed possible. After all, this was the same woman who once told a director, "I'll come to rehearsal when I damn well please." The same woman who strolled into high society parties, coat draped over her shoulders, only to reveal she had nothing on underneath. She lived for spectacle. And unlike other Hollywood legends, she never sugarcoated anything. She spoke openly about sex, about her vices, about the absurdity of celebrity itself. When asked if she had ever been married, she famously quipped, "I've had a man's arms around me, but no man's yoke." By the time Hollywood lost interest, she had already cemented her place in history. The roles dried up, but the stories never did. Even in her later years, when the parties slowed and her body betrayed her, she kept the act going. She still cracked jokes, still drank, still lived as if she'd never left the spotlight. And even after she was gone, her influence lingered. Actresses envied her freedom. Writers quoted her without realizing it. The industry she once terrorized never quite forgot her. Tallulah Bankhead didn't fade away. She made sure of that. She wasn't the richest. She wasn't the most powerful. But she was the wildest, the boldest, the one who Hollywood never quite figured out what to do with. And if that meant brushing her teeth with champagne, then so be it.